Hello everyone, my name is Khadija and I'm the president of the Palestine Student Club at Northwestern University in Qatar. Thank you for joining us today for our roundtable discussion about Sheikh Jarrah and the Palestinian Resistance. Currently, Palestinian families are being forcefully displaced from their homes in Sheikh Jarrah, which is a neighborhood in occupied East Jerusalem, to make way for Israeli settlers. And in response to the protests that have broken out in the neighborhood and across Palestine, armed Israeli forces have been beating residents and protesters, attacking them with pepper spray, stun grenades, rubber bullets, and skunk water. And Israeli police have launched brutal attacks on Palestinians praying at Al-Aqsa Mosque, injuring hundreds. In addition to that, for the past few days, Israel has launched military assaults on Gaza, killing dozens of men, women, and children, and injuring even more. And mainstream media has failed to report accurately about the situation. Palestinian voices are being censored. So in today's event, we hope to provide a space where we can discuss and educate about the ongoing events in Palestine, the international response, media coverage, and how you can stand in solidarity. Before we start, I just want to let you know that this discussion is being recorded and it will be uploaded on our YouTube account afterwards. We have 6 wonderful speakers with us here today. Each speaker will speak for around 5 minutes, and then we'll use the remaining time for open discussion between the speakers. We'll take questions from the audience, so if you have any questions or points you'd like to bring up for discussion throughout, please drop them in the chat and we'll try to get to them in the second half of the event. So without further ado, we'll get started. Our first guest speaker is Laura Albast, a Palestinian journalist, translator, and digital content editor. She currently works at the Institute for Palestine Studies in Washington, D.C. Her research and translations have focused on public diplomacy, community health work, and media governance in the Middle East. And her work has Sorry, please mute yourself so we don't have any echoing. Her work has appeared in the New Era, Bloomberg, Business Week, and Arab American News. And she's been in direct contact with Mohammed al-Kurd since March and has been relaying the reports from Sheikh Jarrah and helping him with any needs he requires from the diaspora, alongside a coalition of organizations in Palestine and the USA. She was also a member of the organizers for the Washington, D.C. rally that happened on Tuesday. So Laura, thank you so much for joining us today, and you have the
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me and everybody else on this amazing panel today to talk about what's going on and how the media is covering this, especially as maybe most of you are journalism students at Northwestern and Doha. I'm going to start with a story. So 2 days ago, I was interviewed on the same day by 3 different journalists. I'm very tired. I'm very stressed out. At 8 a.m., the first journalist began.
لحظة I'll call you back.
At 8 a.m., the first journalist, guys, what do I do? Okay.
Sorry about that, guys. Please mute yourself, everyone other than the speakers, so we don't have any interruptions.
All right. So at 8 a.m., the first journalist was extremely aggressive. He began with, how are you? I'm going to be asking you about this letter I got from a student who is very angry about me hosting an IOF soldier on my show. And if possible, can you also please talk to me about race in America? That was my first red flag there, because a journalist should tell you what he wants to talk to you about when he first reaches out to you. So that made me think, oh, he's probably going to interview us for 10 minutes about Palestine and then instead use a recording whatever we say about race in America rather than publish on Palestine. We had to push back. I was with a colleague. We had to push back and say, you know, we really appreciate that you're covering race in America, but today we're here as Palestinians and we're talking specifically about Palestine. He spent the entire interview pushing back and trying to ask us what we think about terrorism. The whole time he asked us, what do you think about a certain organization in Palestine? He did not ask about the people in Jerusalem. He did not ask about the people in all of Palestine. He did not talk to us as he talked to the IOF spokesperson a day earlier. And we had to push back to an extent that he had to defend himself on the recording that went during prime time on radio in Washington, D.C., to an extent that if you listen to the recording right now, at some point when he asks me, what do you think about a certain organization? And I push back and reject his question as if I am associated with terrorism in any way, because that's how he framed that question, and told him that, you know, you cannot ask every Palestinian you see what they think about terrorism when we are not talking about any terrorism but the Israeli state terror. And you can hear him in the recording saying, oh, I just want to make sure that I'm being neutral, that I am not trying to associate you with being a terrorist or offending your identity. And I think something we can learn from this is that you cannot say you are unbiased and then not tell the truth. There is a huge difference between being a journalist saying, oh, I have to report objectively, I'm an unbiased journalist, and then not tell the truth. That's a huge, they're not mutually exclusive. The second interview I had to run home to get on TV. It was with a broadcasting group in the United States. They couldn't find a Palestinian. They had reached out to a few organizations. It was Eid, people were off. The people who go on media are too busy right now on other requests. So I said, hey, you know, I'm a young Palestinian. I'm willing to go on in 10 minutes. I ran home. And he asked me a few questions about what I thought about the Biden administration's statements, where they refused to condemn the killing of children, where they said that there wasn't a significant overreaction by Israel against Palestinians. And I gave a 20-minute interview explaining how Israel is an apartheid state, explaining exactly what's happening across all of Palestine, not just the bombing of Gaza or the forced expulsion of Palestinians in Jerusalem, but also the lynching and beating of Palestinians in Haifa and Lod and other cities. And I understand, you know, you're a journalist, I'm a journalist. I understand that sometimes full clips don't make the cut, but the report that was released and that was televised across America was a report that was pro-Israeli. So it was an Israeli ambassador speaking, an Israeli student speaking. The whole report was about how Arabs and Palestinians are the ones attacking Israelis, while showing a video of an Israeli driving over a Palestinian and framing it as this group of Palestinians around him are attacking him. And my clip that pops up has no Palestine in it. So I sound like I am talking about the human rights of the Israeli people who are attacking my people. I was extremely upset, and I reached out to him, and I also talked on Twitter, because I'm not going to have my name be used as I'm defending people who are killing our friends and family. And he thought that I was unprofessional. I have not responded to him at all. And this is something that you should, you know, if you are being interviewed and you call someone out, you're getting under their skin, because they're going to tell you, oh, I'm a journalist for 22 years. I don't care. Clearly, you're not doing your job properly. If you can't find a Palestinian spokesperson in America and you have to go digging for one for me to offer, that is not a professional journalism, someone with experience. The third interview, that was a good interview. That was a Black woman on a podcast in DC who knew exactly what she was talking about the entire time. Not only was she asking us questions, she was educating her listeners about what the Nakba is, about what is happening in Palestine. We did not have to explain to anyone, because we are tired of explaining. All day we're following the news, we're trying to figure out if our friends and family are okay, and at the same time people are expecting us to explain to them something that has been going on for 73 years as if they do not know. I appreciated that interview so much, and I had to tell her, you are the only journalist who did her homework and who asked us questions about what we need to do, about what we want to tell people, while you educated them rather than us. I think these are three examples of how American news media are reporting right now. They either are not bringing Palestinians or scrambling to bring one just to show that they are unbiased and giving balanced reporting. They are either aggressive and trying to get something that is clickbait to get Palestinians to say things that can be used against them. And then you have the small outlets that are trying really hard to get our voices out while mainstream media isn't. Unfortunately, at the same time, Canadian media has been extremely silent. I wish Dalia could join us. Unfortunately, she's on a plane and she's not able to log into Zoom. Canadian media has been completely silent. They have not reported about this. There's a letter circulating right now asking the CBC, which is a channel in Canada, to say something about what's going on in Palestine. To give you a small example, weeks ago when the Human Rights Watch report was released accusing Israel of crimes of apartheid, the New York Times tried to discredit Human Rights Watch, even though Human Rights Watch is always cited for human rights abuses that they say are, and obviously in Venezuela, in Cuba, in Syria, and other countries. But when it comes to Israel, apparently Israel does not commit human rights abuses, and suddenly Human Rights Watch is not a reliable organization. But Canada did not even report on Human Rights Watch, which is very, very interesting to me. The other thing I will touch on, and I'm sorry if I went a little over, is the social media specifically. I know that, all of us are on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. I know that these are big companies that are in the United States, and a lot of people do call to boycott them. But unfortunately, these are the only sort of outlets where people are able to either amplify voices or tell the truth. I get all my news from Instagram lives in Palestine, even though there are Arabic news media organizations that are reporting comprehensively on what's going on. There is no English news media reporting comprehensively. So people in the US who might not understand Arabic do not know what is happening or do not understand that things are very urgent. A huge Facebook group a few days ago was disabled. It had more than 130,000 people on it from around the world who were advocating for Palestinian rights in Sheikh Jarrah and all of Palestine. Anyway, so they were advocating for these rights, and Facebook disabled them for hate speech and violating community standards. They did the same thing for hundreds of people on Instagram, where they removed their stories or anything they said about Palestine. Now, luckily, we do have some people in contact. There's a lot of Palestinians who understand the processes of Facebook and try to push back and say, hey, you are clearly, silencing Palestinians. But a few people are not going to be able to give a space for everyone who is censored. I bring this up because Facebook last year appointed an ex-Israeli official who is known for surveying and suppressing Palestinians on social media. Facebook is also known to provide data to the Israeli government, and they have arrested people because of that in Palestine. I am going to stop there, and we can take questions later on, but I do urge everybody who wants to follow anything that is happening to try to find the Palestinians on the ground. I can send, an email later with a few names, but everybody already knows Muhammad al-Kurd, Muna al-Kurd, there's Tariq al-Umari from al-Fahim, there's Aya Khalaf, there's We Are Not Numbers in Gaza. There's a lot of people who are talking on the ground, and we just need to give them the space and the platform to do so. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laura, for starting us off. And I'm sorry about the interruptions. I'm going to just mute everyone now, and the speakers, when it's your time to go, I think you'll just have to request to unmute, just so we don't have that throughout the whole meeting. Okay. So our next speaker for today is Hazar Kilani, a freelance journalist that graduated from Northwestern University in Qatar in 2020. And she's been using her social media to raise awareness and report on what's happening in Palestine and urge others to share and boycott Israeli products. So Hazar, thank you so much for joining us today, and please go ahead.
Hey guys, Laura, thank you so much for sharing. I can only imagine as a Palestinian American how it must have felt, because I watch a lot of these interviews that you mentioned online, I think on a daily basis. And sometimes you can really tell when an interviewee was just cut off, or, you gave like a 1 hour interview and then you had 2 minutes like taken out and just inserted out of context. So I think I just want to start off by talking about how I just want to emphasize how big this is, because I don't think some people realize how big this is for Palestinians to happen. It might have started in Sheikh Jarrah, but at the end of it might have started in Sheikh Jarrah, but now it's spreading across Palestine. And this has not happened in a very long time. And for people, mainstream celebrities, even to be talking about Palestine, we would have never dreamt of seeing this like years ago. It has been very impactful in a sense, especially for Palestinians, I guess, to see support for us going so mainstream. Like no matter what, you do find some comfort in it, because I think we've always felt so alone in the struggle. And it's like, you just feel like the world doesn't care. Whenever someone dies, I think people are so used to Palestinian death, they don't even think about it. It's like, oh, like 13 kids died. What, like, they move on. No one really cares who the kids were. It's just Palestinian kids. It's just kids in Gaza. And it's something that unfortunately I don't think it has changed yet. And it's really painful that we have to share all of these sometimes invasive videos of like families mourning for people to actually care about what's happening. Because I do think a lot about these families and how they feel. And I just want to talk about social media, just adding on to what Laura was talking about. So I think, especially at the start of the movement, people really minimized the impact that social media could have. And the peak of them talking about Palestine was just sharing like an infographic that 100 other people like on their own account shared, and it was like, okay, that's enough activism for today. They didn't realize that following Palestinians on social media, and instead of writing their own think pieces on what's happening in Palestine, just amplifying Palestinian voices, which should have been happening from the start without us having to beg for it online, literally. Um, we don't want you to give your input on what's happening to us. We definitely don't want that. We just want you to take our voices and share that to the world. And I think a lot of people can't seem to process that, unfortunately, because our human rights are not up for debate. Our human rights, we're not going to sit down and explain to someone why we have a right to exist, or why Palestinians in Palestine have a right to resist. Uh, I think it can be very draining for Palestinians, especially in Palestine. Like if a lot of them are online, like you go online, it's like your existence is just being, ripped apart by different groups, and you're just supposed to sit there and just, convince people why you should be alive, or, you know, why these kids weren't used as human shields, which is like a popular, Zionist propaganda myth. And I think after some point, it's a lot. So I hope everyone's taking care of themselves. Every single Palestinian watching this, I hope you're taking time for yourself just to process everything, because it can be a lot. I know everyone that I've been talking to hasn't slept in like a week properly. And I really want to emphasize like the mental health aspect of it, like for us and our people. And I'm sure people in like other struggles as well, when something like was happening all the time, and it was just consistent, just death and just gruesome things, and just everything online in front of you. And it's like there's a new news piece every day. So I'd be too scared to go to bed because I feel like I'm gonna I don't even feel like it. I just know I'm gonna wake up to, you know, Gaza being bombed, or just a lot of people dying, and then just a lot of videos are gonna be shared. And I feel like a lot of people don't even watch what they're sharing, because at the same time, I think our movement has sort of become a trend. Um, so I think, you really need to care about why are you doing this? Like, why are you sharing this video? Okay, yes, we said amplify Palestinian voices, but do you care, or are you just doing this because you're scared of being called out, or because you're scared of being judged? Um, I think a lot of people haven't been thinking a lot about what's been happening, and I like after 3 days of the events, they kind of just took a break and they were like, okay, it's over, back to normal. It's not over. I think this is just the start. What's happening right now? By the way, tell me like time. uh, I think what's happening right now is just the beginning of something really big. And as painful as it is, I think a lot of us Palestinians have a lot of hope for what the future could possibly hold. Just watching the video of people in Jordan like running and bypassing the borders, and in Lebanon as well, it definitely gives you a lot of hope for maybe, if you overlook governments, like maybe there's something in the people. Um, and it was nice, I guess. It gives you, you know, you don't feel as hopeless, and as, it's just my people dying and what's going to happen next, in a sense. Uh, and I really appreciated that, like, particularly, I guess, it took me out of like a slump that I was in. So yeah, I just want to mention that. But yeah, thank you so much, Kayan and like PSC for holding this. I really appreciate it. And
Thank you, Hazar, and thank you for sharing kind of the personal individual side of this and how it impacts us on a mental level. Our third speaker for today is Zain Assaf, a Palestinian student at Georgetown University in Qatar. She's currently pursuing a Bachelor of Science in Foreign Services and majoring in Culture and Politics with a concentration in settler colonialism in Palestine. She's also the president of the Students for Justice in Palestine Club at Georgetown University in Qatar. So thank you, Zain, for joining us today. Let me just unmute you.
All right, okay. Thank you so much, Kayan, for having me, and thank you everyone for joining us today. And thank you, Hazar, and thank you, Laura, for sharing your personal stories. Before we start, I just wanted to spend the first few seconds to read out some of the names of the children that were massacred the past few days in Gaza. I know we talked about how media can become so desensitized, and I just wanted to, read out these names and understand they're not just numbers that we see on media and social media and so on. So we have 15-year-old Muhammad Sulaiman, 16-year-old Mustafa Ubaid, 5-year-old Bara Al-Gharabi, 10-year-old Rahaf Al-Masri, 2-year-old Yazan Al-Masri, 6-year-old Marwan Al-Masri, 11-year-old Ibrahim Al-Masri, 11-year-old Hussein Hamad, 16-year-old Ibrahim Hasnain, 15-year-old Lina Shahrir, 4-year-old Zaid Talibani, 13-year-old Hala Rifi, 2-year-old Maryam Talibani, who is also missing and is presumed dead, 17-year-old Bashar Salmour, 12-year-old Hamza Ali, 13-year-old Hamada Abdel 10-year-old Ammar Muhammad Al-Amour, 12-year-old Ilyad Ibrahim Al-Amour, 13-year-old Yahya Khalifa, 3-year-old Muhammad Al-Tanani, along with his 3 siblings, Itham, 4-year-old, Emir, 5-year-old, Al-Ismail, 6-year-old, 5-month-old Muhammad Zain Al-Attar, and his siblings Islam, who was 5, and Emir, who was 6, 2-year-old Ibrahim Aurzumali, who's also, his age has not been specified, and 17-year-old Zakaria Luz, and 16-year-old Rashid Arra, and 16-year-old Saeed Oday, and 17-year-old Zaif Kaisaisi. I just wanted to spend, these first few seconds to, read out these names, and these are not all the children as well that have passed away, massacred the past few days in Gaza, but we need to remember that these are not only numbers we read in the news. They were, they had their own lives ahead of them. So yeah. And just to add on to what has been already discussed, I think I'll be discussing more about terminology and being an ally in this, what's happening right now, allies to Palestinians. But, we see in media coverage for when it comes to Palestine, and this has been, the case for years, mainstream media has been inaccurately reporting what's happening, and and the language used is very specific and, mind you, intentional. And for example, I'll give you an example. I searched yesterday Palestine, Israel now, and Googled it just to see what articles are coming up about what's happening right now. And the first article that popped out was by the New York Times, and it was titled "Conflict Between Israel and Palestinians Continue to Escalate," with a little caption that said, "Rioting and mob violence between Arabs and Jews tore through towns and cities across Israel. Rockets from Gaza and Israeli airstrikes continue to kill civilians." And this will connect to the idea of terminology, but here we first see them painting it as a conflict, alluding that there's 2 equal sides, a state, Israel, and they say, and a people, Palestinians. They say a conflict between Israel and Palestinians continue to escalate. And then this little caption they put in the articles, riots and mob violence, not colonial violence, between Arabs, not Palestinians, and quote unquote Jews, not settlers or Zionist or right-wing Israelis, and so on. And at the end, they also, sort of equate Gaza rockets and Israeli airstrikes as equal in both killing civilians, when in fact they're not comparable. More than 100 Palestinians were massacred in Gaza the past few days, and that number is incomparable to the casualties from the Israeli side. And again, I repeat, these wordings and terminology is very intentional. And this very biased coverage all goes back to as well very strong U.S. Strong Israeli lobby in the U.S. and the U.K. and Canada that push for this narrative. But again, I want to emphasize that this mainstream media, this problem with media coverage does not only go back to Western media. This is also a problem here in the Middle East. I mean, I'll take one prominent example. The most prominent media agency in the Middle East, Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera Mubashir, they have been, covering what's happening in Palestine for the past few days. And what they do is they every once in a while they bring an Israeli speaker, a Zionist speaker, to come and speak for about what's happening. Giving them more, a platform to speak, even if they give them questions and so on. They attempt to be objective, but again, they're normalizing their presence. For example, Al Jazeera in English does not use the term forced displacement. They rather use the term eviction when they refer to Sheikh Jarrah events. And also yesterday, when they were describing the events that Hazar talked about, where Palestinians crossed the border, trying to cross the border between Palestine and Jordan, they used the term Israeli-Jordanian border rather than Palestinian-Israeli border. And this, in a sense, again, normalizing Israel's presence. So this problem is not only in Western media; it's also in mainstream media in the Middle East, and we need to really emphasize that and use our voice to speak out about our own media agencies as well. So yeah, this is why it's important to, again, make sure that you use the right terminology when it comes to Palestine. And I think this has been spreading around a lot on social media right now. Like Hazar said, there's this huge thing going on, and people are pushing out what terminology to use. And the first thing that people are calling out is to not say Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and this has been used academically and on social media, on mainstream media, and so on. And again, conflict alludes that there's two equal sides in this, and even the term alludes that there's two equal sides, when this is not the fact. It's between colonizers and indigenous and colonized people. And then they also describe Gaza under blockade, when it's in reality an open-air prison under Israeli siege. We experience a blockade here in Qatar. What Gaza is going through is not only a blockade, it's a lot more than that. It's an open-air prison. And again, as I mentioned, the term eviction has also become very popular right now, and people are still using it without understanding what eviction really means, and which alludes that there's a presence of a landlord, and that the people who are trying to take over the houses in Sheikh Jarrah have, they either built them or have rights to them, when in fact that's not the case. So when we use forced displacement or even ethnic cleansing, it's a lot more accurate to present what's happening. And again, also the term ethnic cleansing is very, very important to use in the case of Palestinians, because Palestinians have been undergoing ethnic cleansing for the past 70 years, from the 1948, where they were, uprooted from their homes till today. And I'll just move on to my last point. I hope I still have some time. I'm just going to talk about quickly how people can be better allies to Palestinians right now. And I think first and foremost, in order to be better allies, you need to truly adopt the settler colonial understanding of Palestine. Understand Palestinians are colonized people, that they are indigenous to their land, and they have the right to resist. It's your responsibility to do your research. Palestinians are tired of having to repeat the same thing. There was this new website launched by Palestinians called Decolonizepalestine.com. I mean, it's so much more easier now to really learn about Palestine than it was before. It gives you so much resources. To be a better ally, you also need to understand, to be better allies, you need to amplify Palestinian voices, center Palestinian voices. Do not speak over them, but center them. Do not give presence to Zionist speakers like Al Jazeera does. It's really important to amplify and center Palestinians' voices. And this is really the bare minimum you can do if you want to be you want to be an ally to Palestinian. And furthermore, you can practice BDS. You can practice BDS by boycotting Israeli products and products that directly support Israeli occupation. There's, on top of my head, there's HP and Puma that you can boycott. Here in Qatar, make sure that you also research some items. I mean, there's scooters that are all over Doha that the main investor is Israeli company. So make sure that you do your research and understand, so you can boycott these scooters all over Qatar. And moreover, again, and then this is really important, do not replace political action by, these performative actions of donations and so on. Target your governments. And for example, here in Qatar, there's a Qatari Youth Against Normalization that you could help support. They would benefit a lot from people coming and supporting them. And yeah, and I'll just end my speech with a quick quote, and I think by Malcolm X that summarizes what we've been discussing so far. And he states, "If you're not careful, the newspapers will have you hating the people who are being oppressed and loving the people who are doing the oppressing." Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Zain. And just a note to everyone, all of the resources being mentioned, the ones that Laura mentioned, she'll email to me, and the ones that Zain's mentioning, I'll attach them with the recording when we upload it so you can refer to those. So our next speaker is Khadija Ahmad, a rising junior and communication major at Northwestern University in Qatar. She's from Pakistan, and she's the treasurer of the South Asian Students Association at NUQ. Khadija, thank you for joining us. I'll unmute you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Khadija Ahmad. First of all, thank you to all the speakers who came before me. I thought your points were wonderful. And so I was basically invited here by Kayan to talk about how Palestine is an intersectional issue. And because I'm here representing South Asia, that's because I'm the treasurer of the South Asian Students Association, I will try to kind of briefly summarize how the history of South Asian countries, resistant movements, anti-imperialist movements intersect with the Palestinian resistance and struggle for liberation. So basically, my first introduction to Palestine as a site of anti-imperialism was through the radical Urdu literary tradition. Many people who come from this tradition are one of Pakistan's most famous poets, which is Faiz Ahmed Faiz. He was politically exiled to Lebanon for quite some time after there was a military dictatorship in Pakistan under Zia al-Haq. Over there in Lebanon, he made acquaintances and formed close friendships with the likes of Mahmoud Darwish, with Edward Said, with another Pakistani academic slash someone who advocated for the Palestinian resistance, who is also Iqbal Ahmed. Faiz, in his poetry, he has evoked Palestine so many times that people say that you could compile volumes of his poetry. Faiz, he views Palestine in all his poetry as the beacon of hope and resistance, where at that time, internationalism and third worldism was basically like one of the main anti-imperialist movements. And Palestine was the center of that, because Palestine, this strayed away from popular Pakistani imaginations, which now dominate, where Palestine is viewed as a Muslim cause. And it talked about Palestine as a secular cause, where Palestinians were robbed of their land, they were dispossessed. In several of Faiz's poems, he talked about the dispossessed Palestinian child. He talked about Palestinian martyrs who died abroad and in occupied Palestine. He talked about Palestinian revolutionaries, and all are anti-imperialist movements. They look to Palestine as a beacon of hope and resistance. And I think that's important, because you realize what intersectionality truly means. You realize intersectionality is looking to a movement and seeing that this movement deserves sort of liberation because you love them. There's a radical sort of affection there because you know that the people deserve liberation. You know that the people are unjustly colonized, they're unjustly occupied. And I think if we all focus on this tradition, this radical tradition of looking at Palestine as then said as settler colony, we would all be appalled at the injustices that are currently taking place. I think I also want to talk about another example in South Asia, which is, if we want the principles of anti-colonialism, if we practice them, what stands out is the example of Kashmir. And I want to I don't exactly want to make an analogy because those are harmful, but I want to talk about the solidarity between Kashmir and Palestine. So Kashmir, as we're reading in new literary criticisms and scholarship, is that Kashmir is also a settler colony. Kashmir is also occupied. And I did research on this, and what I found was that as was done when the Black Lives Matter protests were taking place in the USA, a lot of Palestinians were key in informants telling people that what kind of tear gas was being used, because they had experienced the oppression those technologies actually perpetuated. In Kashmir, it's the very same. In 2016, in an interview, several what they're known as street fighters, they said that they actually learned how to make pellet guns from Facebook groups where Palestinian like teenagers were exchanging information, telling them how to make these pellet guns, how to resist. So these traditions of resistance, of anti-coloniality, they're fluid. They were passing them on, and this is a great sort of, this is not just resistance, this is a great sort of radical form of love, so, like Bell Hooks has talked about, where you sympathize with the other people across the globe because you love them and you love them and you want them to resist and be free. So several Kashmiris have now identified a lot of their uprisings. They call them Intifadas. This is terminology directly borrowed from the Palestinian struggle for liberation. A lot of graffiti in Kashmir now, between like "Go India, go back," we don't want Modi. You'll see that "Save Gaza." You'll see "Free Palestine," because that all your resistances, all your freedom, Kashmir's freedom, they recognize that it comes on the condition that Palestine is free. All our freedoms the condition is that Palestine is free, because this is a global, Palestine is a global cause. I think I'll share some quotes from Fez, where Fez was asked, what does Palestine mean to you? And he said that I've spent so much time with Palestinians that I am a Palestinian. Iqbal Ahmad said that in the marvelous tradition of Arabism, I am also an Arab, because this Palestine is our cause. Because if we say we love freedom, we want Palestine to be free. Yeah, I think basically that's it for me.
Thank you so much, Khadija. Our fifth speaker for today is Nadej Bizimungu, a journalism senior at Northwestern University in Qatar, and she's a member of the Palestine Student Club. She's from Rwanda, and she's the co-founder and previous president of NUQ's African Students Association. And for the past 2 years, Nadej has been actively involved in organizing to increase opportunities for marginalized groups on campus and condemning systemic racism at NUQ and the wider education city. Nadej, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and thank you for that introduction, Kayan. And I want to first thank all the speakers for those amazing points and your thoughts. And I think you really talked about most of the things that I was actually thinking about touching upon. Khadija actually mentioned some of them, but before I go any further, first of all, I just want to say that I'm here as an ally and supporter of the Palestinian resistance, and as an Palestinian myself. I'm in no position in any way to fully understand the struggle of Palestinians, but however, as a human being and as a Black woman and somebody who comes from a country that was formerly colonized, and I really think my country is still being colonized, but that's a conversation for another day. I really think that I kind of get partly some of the pain that Palestinians around the world are feeling right now, even though I can't 100% grasp how hard it has been for the past years. Yeah, and so this explains why I really want to use this time to kind of tell non-Palestinians, mostly who are here, why solidarity, specifically intersectional solidarity with Palestine, is really important, and contextualize specifically from my own personal experiences as a Black woman and somebody from a colonized country, and try to contextualize it. I'm really not an expert in any way, but I would just try to talk a little bit about what I already know. Yeah. So some of you have came across an interview from, there's this interview that Nelson Mandela did with ABC News in 1990. It was the first time he visited the US after 27 years of imprisonment during apartheid in South Africa. And someone from the audience asked him why him and the members of his political party back then, the African National Congress, why he supported the Liberation Organization. And he responded with something along the lines of, that was back in 1990. So he said something along the lines of, just like ourselves, Palestinians are fighting for the right to self-determination. We know too well that our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of Palestinians. And he said these words to link the Palestinian struggle to the Black South Africans' fight against apartheid in South Africa. And South Africa's apartheid ended 4 years after Mandela said these words. And unfortunately, the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians has not stopped since 1990. And if anything, it has only been worse. So, and I do have my reservation and criticism about Mandela and his legacy, may he rest in peace. But I have been personally thinking about these words for the past few weeks and trying to understand and remind myself why my freedom, my personal freedom, is incomplete without the freedom of Palestinians. Because we post these things on Twitter, we post it on social media, you see it and you're like, oh, it actually, rhymes, it makes sense. Our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of Palestinians, right? But what exactly does that mean from a personal level, from the struggles that we come from who we are as a people? So I personally tried to unpack that for the past few days, and I realized a link and a connection that I had not really thought about. So I'm going to use this opportunity to talk about specifically my country, where I come from. So I come from Rwanda, and my country was colonized by Belgium and German. And so during colonialism, most people know this history that Belgian colonizers used divide and rule to turn Hutus and Tutsis against each other, which later, after independence, led to the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda, which was one of the worst tragedies of our time, they say. So, so when the 1994 genocide was happening, right, in Rwanda, I wasn't really born back then, but the whole world stood back. I know that for sure. And they watched more than 3 million people get slaughtered on live TV for 3 months, for 100 days. 1 million people, actually 1 million people, not 3 million, 1 million people in 100 days. And the United Nations withdrew their troops, the so-called United Nations withdrew their troops from Rwanda. And so they let everything happen. And it wasn't until the RPF, which is a group of Tutsi refugees who had been kicked out of the country in 1958, they joined forces in armed resistance to end the 1994 genocide. And in other words, Rwandans freed themselves in the end, And well, what does this have to do with Palestine? And I'm not really a historian, but for me personally, to be able to understand, to kind of draw the colonial history between my country and the global struggle for liberation and understand how Palestine fits into that, I really had to think about my own identity. So I want to specifically draw some parallelism, but it doesn't necessarily mean that in any way this equates to the struggle of Palestinians, because there is a different history in Palestine, and that obviously has to be recognized. But one thing that I realized from this history, from what happened in my country to what has been ongoing for the past, since 1948 in Palestine, starting with the so-called divide and rule that was used to divide my country, specifically during colonialism, by Belgians. This is the same method that the British used to divide Palestine, and later used by Israel to divide Palestinian resistance movement. And we have also seen how liberal Western media, specifically everybody talked about this, keeps framing the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians as a clash, conflict. People like Trevor Noah, who come from apartheid South Africa, ironically, and news outlets like the New York Times, they keep framing this as a two-sided conflict, this and that, something you can't really understand. And we have seen this narrative for the past week, for anybody who has been following the news, right? And I realized when I was seeing all that, I realized that this is actually the same narrative that Western media still uses to describe what happened in Rwanda in 1994, and has been literally 27 years after the genocide. But there are still claims that it was a civil war, it was two-sided. forgetting that the Tutsis were the targeted group and the Hutus were the perpetrators, and the genocide was funded by Belgium and France. And this is proof that, these news organizations actually work to kind of fulfill the Western propaganda. And there's no way that, our liberation should be based on following sources like BBC and relying on that to actually learn about the Palestinian resistance. And I really think that I want to use this point to actually encourage everybody to make sure that if you actually want to, learn about what's happening, it's important to see what you're sharing. Specifically, people like Trevor Noah have always been, at least for me, I've always loved Trevor Noah, but then I was really completely disappointed, but not surprised to see that he's obviously part of a Western liberal media construct and industrial complex. So to see people like that literally refuse to even say the word apartheid to describe what's happening in Palestine, considering the facts and everything that has been ongoing for so long, is 100% really disappointing. And I really want to encourage everybody to kind of enlarge the sources that you're trying to learn from, because I really think that's where the gatekeeping starts from, and that's where you start thinking that, oh, there are actually two sides, this person is saying this and that, which is 100% wrong. And so lastly, I want to highlight that the Palestinian people have long supported struggles everywhere, and which obviously even explains why there are people on the continent who are currently protesting. We have seen protests in South Africa, we've seen protests in Sudan, we've seen protests in Kenya, even though like the Kenyan police decided to like tear gas the protesters, but the Kenyan police is also trained by IDF. So I really think that our countries, also one thing that we should also realize is that we need to analyze how the countries we come from normalize relationships with Israel and how they contribute to the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, because we as ordinary people can talk about these things, but if you don't realize how our countries are directly contributing to it and speaking out about it, then it doesn't really 100% change much. So I also want to add one last thing. I think my 5 minutes are almost over. So I want to say that in 2018, during the Ferguson uprising in the US, when the protests erupted, it was Palestinian activists who were the first to express solidarity, which helped develop the global solidarity for the Black Lives Matter movement. And so there is a whole history of like Palestinian solidarity with other struggles across the world, with Black people, with colonized people across the world. And we have seen Palestinians even themselves have taken explicit inspiration from the civil rights movement and the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa to develop the BDS movement. So it doesn't really make sense to me when somebody says they support, Black Lives Matter and LGBTQ+ rights, but they just don't support the Palestinian resistance. So really, like, you have to understand that our struggles are really interconnected in different ways. And in the end, as colonized people, as I'm talking to people who are like colonized and marginalized in quotes, who are part of, the Western spectrum of, the spectrum of power of the West versus everybody else. So I just think I'm talking to you all to realize that when we talk about associating, siding with Black people, fighting racism, fighting every otherism, fighting everything, and then when it comes to Palestine, we want to make it about two sides, yet literally we wouldn't, at least my country wouldn't have independence if my people had not resisted. And I really think that even, let's go back to Harriet Tubman, let's go back to every revolution that ever happened, that ever ended anything, people had to resist. So I really think that as people who are non-Palestinians, it's important that we don't really tell Palestinians how they should I've seen like narratives on Twitter and on Instagram, people saying, oh, this is how Palestinians should resist. You know, I support Palestinian resistance if it's peaceful, but if it's not peaceful, I won't support it. I don't think it's anybody's place to tell Palestinians how to resist, the same way nobody told our ancestors how to resist. So, and we owe that to, we owe that to ourselves, to our dignity, and as people, to actually realize that this is way beyond Palestine. This is Western imperialism, and this is a settler colonialism, and we normalize this. We have seen what history has done, and we can't allow this to happen to Palestinians. So I want to end with one last quote from I want to end with one last quote from Hazar Ahmad, and it says, it's about solidarity. So a lot of people, when we talk about solidarity, a lot of people think that, our struggles are the same. So if we're in solidarity, then it means that, we're the same. But as Hazar Ahmad beautifully puts it, solidarity does not necessarily mean that, we're the same, that we don't recognize our differences. It just means that it's an involvement, a lifetime commitment to work and recognize that even though we do not necessarily have the same feelings or the same lives or the same bodies, we do have a common ground and a common enemy. In this case, it's Western imperialism and settler colonialism. So our countries have been there, Palestine is still there, and I think as a people, as people who know the history of the world, it's our responsibility to actually do whatever we can in any way that we can do it to actually support Palestinians. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nadej. Thank you for sharing your experiences and for drawing these really important connections. And I want to thank all of our speakers for all of the experiences they shared today. I want to quickly note that our sixth speaker, Dalia Masri, was unable to join us. She's currently on a flight, but we really appreciate her attempts to join us from a plane. So now we can move on to the discussion and question and answer part of the event. And before we take any questions, I just want to open the floor if any of the speakers want to respond to any points that other speakers have made, or if they want to add anything that they couldn't fit into their time frame. No, all good. Okay, I'll start us off with a question, and I welcome the audience to drop off any questions or any discussion points they'd like to bring up. So Nadej touched on this when she mentioned Trevor Noah, but one strategy about raising awareness about Sheikh Jarrah in Palestine has been pressuring or encouraging celebrities, influencers, and public figures to share and repost and this kind of stuff. And there's been a lot of people who have been critical about this because they say that celebrity statements can be performative or they're uninformed, or celebrities will abstain, saying that it's too complex of an issue and they need to do a lot of research before they can speak on it. And this has been very prominent on social media. So I'd welcome, any thoughts from the speakers on how we should approach this. Not really sure if you can raise your hand or indicate that you want to speak so that I can unmute you.
So I think I'm just going to start off. I think I've seen a lot of criticism online. Yeah, that, celebrities come out, we pressure them, we comment under their posts, we DM them, post about Palestine, then they come out with this, it's a two-side conflict statement. But at the same time, while some celebrities may come out with such statements, you should also recognize, or people should also recognize that some other celebrities come out with decently good statements. For example, if you take Halsey, I don't know if you guys have seen her Twitter recently, but she's been very vocal about what's been happening in Palestine. She's been actually spreading the Palestinian narrative, not the Western imperialist narrative. And it was so weird. Halsey has a huge fan base. And why do we care if celebrities share? It's because they have a big platform. I remember when everything in Sheikh Jarrah first started, we have this Palestinian group chat on Twitter, and we were all just talking about how, which celebrities should we reach out to? We were brainstorming which celebrities could possibly have, a stance on Palestine that's decent. And a lot of, as as Ghada mentioned, a lot of people do look up to celebrities. Their fan bases are dedicated to them. It's crazy. And a weird thing on like Twitter is a lot of the people who actually retweet our stuff are like K-pop celebrities, K-pop fans for some reason. But it's their fans are really dedicated, and if a celebrity says they believe in a certain thing, they will go and research it, or they might even blindly follow it and take it as like just word of the absolute word. So it's very important to recognize how big their platforms are, and that while they may come out with like two-sided statements, first of all, a lot of celebrities have been called out, like they will get clowned online for posting a two-sided statement. For example, if you look at the Rihanna statement, and a lot of others, DJ Khaled, Mohammed Hadid, a lot of these people, especially Mohammed Hadid and DJ Khaled, they're literally Palestinian. You will get called out, and I think that's what's beautiful about the internet, is that cancel culture exists. A lot of people hate it, but people won't forget what a celebrity's stance is on something. A lot of celebrities, if they see that a certain celebrity has been called out really bad for their statement, that might also make them think twice before putting out an uninformed statement. So yeah, for sure, call it like, no matter what statements come out, it's fine. We've been putting up with like two-sided conversations from the media our entire like lives ever since the Nakba. So I'm sure we can put up with the celebrity putting up a statement that doesn't properly reflect what's happening on the ground, just for just in case they might actually put out something good. And I think that's my opinion on it, at least.
Yeah, I've just requested that all the speakers unmute just so that you guys can feel free to jump in whenever you wish. So Laura, do you have anything to add?
No,
Okay.
I think Hazar said it all.
Okay, great. We have a raised hand from the audience. So Nora, I'm just gonna ask you to unmute if you have a question you'd like to ask.
It's less a question, but I just think also like, I mean, it is a question, but what do you feel about having discourse around celebrities who have either done something in the past or something questionable? I think that it's less important to focus on discourse around celebrities right now than to focus on people that are actively being hurt, dying, attacked. So personally, I've seen a lot of discourse surrounding certain celebrities who have either, like raised a flag or signed a flag or said that they want to visit Israel or something in the past. But I don't think this is what we should be focusing on right now. I think we need to focus on what we can do and how we can inform others instead of pressuring celebrities into saying things that are usually lip service, I don't think this is the most important thing to focus on right now. It is definitely an issue that we need to focus on, but I don't think it's the number one thing we should be involved in, because it becomes kind of an obsession to focus on discourse surrounding celebrities or public figures.
I'm just gonna, ask all speakers to unmute. That way you can keep it unmuted and jump in whether or not you have something to say. So does anyone want to respond to that?
Yeah, so Nura, well, I do agree with you. I also don't at the same time. I feel that energy and effort can be divided on different fronts. Just because they have a lot of followers, that mean you can reach a lot of people who don't even know about Palestine. To give you an example, honestly, I forgot the celebrity's name, which I'm not into pop culture a lot, but there's a really huge, I think, rapper in America who actually went out and said, I regret performing in Israel now that I know everything that has taken place. Even those who are giving statements that are unacceptable, like Rihanna, which is hilarious, to be honest, and a different singer, I also forgot her name, I'm so sorry. She also gave out a statement that is similar to Rihanna's, where she's talking about, I condemn violence between two sides, etc. And then Muhammad could got her on a live with him and basically educated her on what's happening. So from one hand, there's those of us who are organizing actively in our own cities, demanding that our governments take action. And there are people who are amplifying voices who can't leave the house, who can just do it on social media. But there is also these groups who, you know what, they can't organize, they don't have contact on the ground. What they can do is pressure enough celebrities. I will give an example of AOC. I know that she's a politician, but in some ways she's a celebrity in the US. I don't know if you've seen when there was, she had said that she was going to go to a memorial for Rabin by one of the liberal Zionist organizations in the US. Everybody just tweeted and tweeted and tweeted at her. Why would you go to the memorial of this killer? He has killed children in Palestine. He is not a peacemaker. They really hit her hard, and she withdrew her RSVP. That pissed off a lot of Zionists and Israelis in America, but that shows that in some ways, the public opinion is sort of shifting, especially in progressive circles, to be progressive also on Palestine, not except on Palestine. I don't know, I hope that helps out. I will have to mute. There is a lot of noise around me, so I will try to unmute when I can. Sorry.
Yeah, of course, no worries. Any of the other speakers want to add anything?
Yeah, so Laura pretty much covered everything, but I just want to add on, because Noura mentions that we should be focusing on the people dying instead. But the way I see it is that it's a cycle, or it's like, a means towards an end goal. So using celebrities raises awareness. At the end of the day, people hear about something. A lot of people, you might be surprised about how many people don't even know that Palestine is even a thing. No matter what, we can't deny that reality. So when you reach these people and maybe, say a quarter of their followers actually end up Googling something, at the end of the day, you get more people, you maybe get more people on our side. And, for example, if we're talking about US celebrities, a lot of them are advocating maybe for for the US to cut their aid to Israel. And it's been like a big movement and like a big demand recently. And it's being Senate, Congress is talking about it. I think, people, if they reach more Americans, or, maybe aid to Israel might be canceled. And that would be a very big step no matter what, because that's a defense aid, apparently, because they have to defend themselves, from children and rocks. So I think at the end of the day, we're just using them so that we can get to other places and other people, and that maybe at the end we will benefit from it one way or another, hopefully.
Thank you, Hazar. There was a question in the chat. Someone asked that there's a lot of discourse about decolonization, and some individuals may be unfamiliar with the term or what it means. So could you discuss what's the process of decolonization and how it differs in theory and in practice? Anyone want to take this one on?
I'm not sure. I think this is a tough question. I don't know. Maybe we have Professor Sami Hemrez might answer this maybe a lot better than we might do. But
As he said in the chat,
No, Professor, stay.
Okay, I can pose another question if no one feels comfortable asking this, and I think we can drop some resources about decolonization when we, as Laura said, we'll drop some resources about decolonization when we upload this recording, and you guys can read up on that. There's another raised hand, so I'll unmute Asma.
Okay, hi everyone. Thank you so much to all the speakers for talking and just organizing this entire talk. I think it was much needed. So my question is more on the practical side, as in groundwork, as in what we're all doing. So something I personally have noticed is that every time we have some sort of like we have a movement, you know, there are always those people who have like fraud information and so on and so forth. So something I've noticed recently is a lot of like fake I've forgotten what the word is, petitions that you find. So a lot of people are sending out like fake petitions, like, oh, sign this if you support Palestine and so on and so on. And, you know, you want to sign as many legitimate petitions as you can, and as many things that actually make sense and go towards helping people. So how can we tell the difference between like which petitions are actually like proper ones, like real ones, and which ones are fake, and or where can we go to find like the right petitions and places to like sign and do that? Yeah.
Good question. Anyone want to take this one on?
I mean, I can, if no one else is gonna jump in, I'm just gonna like answer this on like a basic level. I think one way is just follow, yeah, I know that there are a lot of petitions. One way is to just follow Palestinians online. I don't know, but I think we kind of just end up sharing the legitimate ones, or at least the ones that we believe are legitimate. And like that might be helpful for you, because I haven't seen personally that many petitions, to be honest. So I would definitely recommend that you follow like vocal Palestinians online who are very active, and you know, ones that would share a petition, because if there is a petition worth sharing, then trust me, they will be talking about it and they will be sharing it. So that's definitely my recommendation.
Yeah, and I'll just quickly add, I think, you know, you can follow organizations that put up these petitions. I think there's Palestinian Youth Movement who has like a link tree that has a bunch of petitions you can sign. So yeah, I think, you know, looking at where they come from, the organizations that are putting up these, you know, legitimate Palestinian organization putting out these petitions are the ones that should be trusted. And also make sure about donations as well. This doesn't only apply to petitions, because there are a lot of fake donations sites going around. So, you know, you need to double check that before donating any money.
For donations, I just want to, oh, sorry, Laura. I just want to make sure, like, just know that there are no donations for Sheikh Jarrah. As we stand right now, every single Sheikh Jarrah donation link that you've seen online is fake or just untrustworthy. So please do not donate to anything for Sheikh Jarrah. If there's any donations or any donation links, follow Muhammad al-Kurd. He will definitely be sharing it, and Mun al-Kurd online on all platforms. So yeah, Laura, you can go.
No, you guys covered it, so it's okay.
And we have an answer in the chat about decolonization, the earlier question. Anyone wants to look at that. We have a number of raised hands, so I'm gonna unmute Martin next.
Yeah, I think also the question on what would you say to the following statement, fight Zionists at all fronts, even debating them on news channels, is very interesting. It's a good question.
If you want, you can take that question and then we can get to the people with their hands raised.
I mean, Laura, I feel like you have more experience.
Super quickly, you know, there are certain principles and red lines that Palestinians should have. And I think it's awesome when you see a Palestinian or Arab on TV and a Zionist, and the Palestinian interrupts and says, "Hey, I'm leaving." That is an embarrassment to the journalist, especially that's live. I do not debate Zionists. Palestinians in general do not. Those who do are either normalizers or they just fell into a trap. We don't do it, right? We don't do it. It's not debate that we should be doing, it's debunking of myths, it's telling the truth. So that's what we should be pushing for. If we do find ourselves in a space with a Zionist and we cannot leave, then we do not address anything they say. Always remember, not just when it comes to Zionists, even if you're being interviewed or if you're covering or anything, you are not talking to a journalist, you are not talking to the person who's sitting next to you, you're talking to the viewers and the listeners. So do not even listen to the question that's being asked to you. Just think what it is that I want the 100 or 200 or 300 people who are watching me right now to know. So that's my advice.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly add as well, like this doesn't only apply like when you're interviewing, you know, in media and so on. I think this also applies, let's say in universities, you have a couple of Zionists and so on, you know, just do not engage with them. I've seen this recently happening, and you know, there's nothing that's going to come out of this. You know, you give them more platform when you try to reply and respond to their questions and respond to their statements and so on. So again, Palestinians have been saying this for constantly. Do not, you know, indulge with Zionists online on your campuses and so on. Just let them be and try to amplify your own voice, the Palestinian voices.
Yeah, and just to add on, even online, I think there's been like an epidemic of Khaliji Zionists who are like, you know, active online, and they post the most frustrating tweets. And I know that. I recommend just blocking them. Don't engage with them. I see a lot of people engaging with, especially like Arab Zionists, and these are specifically like the people who should not be engaging with like the most. Actually, all Zionists, because like they can just snitch on you, and you can just be on some list, or if you're in the U.S., you can be on Canary Mission, and you don't want to go through that. Just block Zionists. Don't engage with them online ever. There is no point. Khaliji Zionists, do not give them a platform. Do not let their tweets blow up with your replies. Just, even if you want to ratio them, it's not worth it. Just don't speak to them.
Okay, I'll take Martin's question now.
Well, hi everyone. Thank you to all the speakers that have made statements today. Well, for me, I didn't really want to I didn't really want to ask a question. I just wanted to add something to the discussion. So basically what I've seen is that, like, I'll take me for an example. Like before I came here, I didn't know anything about Palestine. And I'm not even going to sugarcoat it and say, oh my gosh, it's probably because there were like shortcuts and all that stuff that I just didn't like look into. But like the entire idea of Palestine sort of entered my brain as soon as I got here. So I'm saying this in order to basically show the importance of media when it comes to basically presenting the issues that are happening in Palestine. And at the same time with that, there's also issues that come with people posting stories for the sake of posting, just because they know that people are going to say something against them, potentially, if they were to decide to not say anything. So I just wanted to say that this issue is much more complex than we're making it out to be. There is a need in order for us to share accurate information. However, it is very difficult to dictate the sort of intention when it comes to basically sending out this or communicating this message with people. So I think there's a lot of having to sort of just make sure that everything is basically taken into consideration when we decide to share information online, if that makes sense.
Any responses from the speakers? Anyone want to add on to that? Okay.
No, I mean, I think Martin's right, for sure.
Yeah. I was just gonna say that I agree with Martin as well, but I also think that there's really no way that we can measure people's intentions. We can't really determine who's performative and who's not, and who's doing it for the sake of getting clout, or who's doing it for, you know, because other people are doing it. It's really hard to measure intention in situations like this. So I think that the benefits outweigh the costs. You know, it's performative activism is better than nothing at all. Like at least people posting and raising awareness because of the pressure that other people are doing it still raises awareness, still has some form of impact, even though, you know, the intentions of people, either ways, like people who are not really with you, people who are not with the Palestinian resistance and Palestinian struggle, their true colors always come out in one way or another, either through a reflection of how they support different other struggles or through how they, express themselves. So eventually, yeah, it happens. So I just wanted to say that.
Great point. Thank you, Nadej. We have 2 more raised hands. We'll try to take those. I know we've gone over time, but we'll try to take these 2 questions quickly. Princess, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, hi. I just want to say thank you so much to everyone who spoke today in the discussion. I do have a question, and it's something that has bothered me for quite some time because I live in a very conservative, very religious household, and there are whole communities and whole generations where basically like they believe that Israel is the right, like they have the right to claim the land of Palestine. But their whole point of argument is basically the Bible, and so they frame the events as religious conflict, and I really don't have any way to approach it, especially when my own parents believe that sort of thing. I just wanted to ask if there's like any sort of like approach to having to counter that kind of narrative.
That's a tough question because it's hard to make someone who has a faith that has been with them for years and years to suddenly stop believing something, specifically when it comes to religion. I'm not talking about political beliefs, etc. Especially when it comes to religion, that's very difficult because a lot of communities are inherently religious, as you said. I would like to emphasize that one good thing to say is that what's happening in Palestine is not a religious thing. It's not a religious situation or where they use conflict, right? It's about occupier and occupied. It's a human rights issue. It's an idea of balance of power. If people really want to fight you back, the fact that over 130 people die in Gaza and one is dead in Israel or one is injured in Israel. There's a huge difference between when they tell you in Israel, oh, we're going into shelters. Well, the rest of the Palestinians don't have shelters to go to. So the idea, what you can try to do, and again, it is very difficult to have someone who believes this in their own religion to get them to unbelieve it. But what you can try to do is try to talk to them from the perspective of just people's stories. That is what I would suggest. I don't know if anybody else has anything to say.
I mean, Israel has a very long history of also assaulting like Palestinian Christians. It's not like it's only the Muslims or Muslim holy sites that are being, invaded and, bombed or disrespected in in any way. And I think if you go online, there's like a lot of proof of that happening. So maybe if it is from a religious perspective, because I definitely get that, it's very tough. If it's from a religious perspective, then maybe, Christian, like you can approach it from the sense of like Christian Palestinians, so that your parents understand maybe, or like your family, that it's not just about Muslims versus like Jewish people. It's just an occupier versus an occupied, and hopefully like that would move something inside them, or like make them change their mind.
One thing to add just that could help is, and that is a reality, is that the majority of people in Israel are not actually observant or follow some religious practices. They use the Torah as a justification for what they're doing. But if you actually look to the Jewish people who are committed to their faith and who observe and practice their faith, they are all with Palestine, every single one of them. They come out to the protests that we make. If you look at Jewish Voice for Peace, they recently posted videos of what's happening in Palestine, and they came out and they said, in our religion, this is what we are taught. In our history as Jewish people, this is what we are taught, and we reject what is happening to Palestinians. So I think it's important to push back against any religious claims to the land. because the Israelis who are committing the crimes themselves, the majority of them are atheist or agnostic.
Thank you for your question, Princess. I'm glad to see we have a number of other questions. Noel, if you wanna pose your question or your comment.
Wait, hi, can you hear me? I wanted to ask something. I think one thing is, I think is like not being talked about, how, or if someone could help on this, find more organizations that could help in Gaza. Anyone that became disabled because of the Israeli occupation. Because I think one of the things that I feel there's lacking in international media, that they're not talking about how many people are becoming disabled and how the Israeli army is attacking people on one of the things that I tried covering in activism generally past few years, that they're not talking about how they're using weapons on Palestinians to make them disabled and then terrorize them even more once they become disabled. If anyone could help in finding charities that could help Palestinians that became disabled to get them assistive devices and any assistive aid for them, if anyone has any point of view or direction, that would be really helpful. Because a lot of Palestinians, I'm Kashmiri, and Kashmir has the same issue of Kashmiris being attacked and becoming disabled from those attacks, right? They're becoming blind, wheelchair bound, or even permanently disabled. And that's the same thing in Palestine. And if there's any way or help, if anyone with charities to share that, to really support this, and if someone can also guide, that's it. Sorry, thank you.
Thank you. I'm not sure if anyone would know anything off the top of their mind, but this is like a really important point, and thank you for bringing it up. If anyone in the audience already knows something, then they could feel free to drop it in the chat. But otherwise, I myself will look into this afterwards, and we'll see if there's any resources we can share, anything we can bring up about this. Oh, sorry, Hazar, go ahead.
Sorry. I don't have anything to add, but I just want to point out to the audience to please keep in mind that the reason Israelis may aim to maybe hit a Palestinian in the eye or just, give them a disability for the rest of their lives is that it's like hitting two birds with a stone for them. So yes, they give the Palestinian a disability and it's going to be hard. Like the life of the Palestinian is going to be harder and it's going to be harder for them to resist either physically or anything. At the same time, the death toll is lower. So that's the way that they approach this from. Unfortunately, I don't have any resources off the top of my head, but that's a very good question.
Hassana, if you want to speak your question or your comment.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
This is more of like a comment in regards to what Princess said. So I noticed that we are looking at Israeli Zionists or Jewish Zionists when we're talking about the discussion of what's happening in Israel, but what's an important corner and quite frankly a huge driver in regards to especially the recent Trump administration is that Christian Zionists and Christians in general from like evangelical or very like conservative backgrounds support Israel, not because of like any sort of like colonial reason. It's more of a religious reason because they see the return of the Jewish people to Israel as a prerequisite for the rapture and the second coming of Christ. So in regards to what Princess is saying, her parents may see this within a religious framework and like a religious like logic, if that makes sense, whilst we as like these like young and UQ students see it as like a colonial like framework, for example. So I feel as though we should do it in a matter of fight fire with fire, in the sense that we also use the religious framework against them, in the sense that if you look at, for example, the 10 commandments, the most obvious ones are thou shalt not kill and thou shalt not steal. But what's happening in the occupied territories in the West Bank, there are clear examples of theft by these Israeli colonizers in which they forcibly expel Palestinians from their native land, and as well as killing as well when they target protesters and snipe innocent medics as well, which is a violation of many international. But might I digress? I feel as though when we are looking and arguing with these kinds of people, they don't really care if it's a colonial struggle or it's a personal struggle. From their angle, it's a matter of religion. So we should also acknowledge that we can also, when we are engaging with those who disagree with us, we should look at it from a religious framework as well, and ultimately fight fire with fire and use that sort of logic against them as well.
Yes, thank you, Hassan. I think there's a lot of different mindsets, a lot of different ways to approach it. And as Princess is commenting in the chat, like it depends on how they're looking at it from the religious mindset, from the colonial mindset. But thank you for your point. Omar, do you have a question?
Hi. So I have a question. I heard Israelis are usually forced to be in the military, but of course not every country has bad people. But why is it that they don't surrender them their rights for the cause that Palestine is being attacked? Like, you know, if they know that like Palestine is like, you know, being attacked by Israeli soldiers, and they know all this stuff is happening, why is it that they still go to the military?
Sorry, who are you talking about?
I'm talking about like the Israeli soldiers. They go to, why they go to the military if they know it's the wrong thing?
They don't actually. Surveys that have been done, polls that have been done in Israel among Israeli citizens show that a huge majority of youth and Israelis believe that the Palestinians should be killed and should be forced out. So no matter what they tell, a huge majority in Israel believe that they should be killed. They love serving the military. The few who are more educated, perhaps, or learn later on, and they are forced to serve, they go to jail for refusing to serve. Maybe, you know, I don't know if you know this, but this went viral a few years ago. A Taylor Swift fan account was run by someone who identifies as an Israeli citizen, and they had disappeared for a while and came back, said, "Hey, sorry, I was in jail." And they asked the person why, and they said, "Oh, I refused to serve in the military to kill Palestinians." So that's what they do to people who reject, right? At the same time, extreme right wing, this is just for your information, extreme right wing you know, Jews in Israel are not required to serve. There's a certain sect in Judaism, because of the religion, they are not required to serve in the military, but they are the most racist. They're all racist, but they are the most racist out of all of them. They're the ones who are leading the Death to Arabs chants right now.
Thank you.
We've reached an hour and 30, so I think we're gonna, you know, kind of closing remarks unless any speakers have any final things they want to add. Okay, well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining our roundtable discussion. Thank you to the wonderful guest speakers for all the informative and enlightening comments you've made, and also to the audience, which has been very, you know, engaged. And I've seen the comments, and I'm really glad that you guys are engaging with this topic. And just as we, you know, come to an end, as we established through many examples today, media coverage is not accurately reflecting the situation. So it's up to each of us to share and to repost this information on social media. All the resources you've heard today, I'll link them, but there's many more going around on all different social media platforms. And, you know, make sure to boycott the companies that are complicit in the ethnic cleansing of Sheikh Jarrah and Palestine as a whole, and, you know, to keep the momentum and to keep talking about this topic. So thank you once again, everyone, for attending this event, and you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.